Sign now, or I guarantee you'll never work in this industry again." Finley Burke's words hung in the conference room like a thinly veiled threat. He slid the termination letter across the glass table, his knuckles white against the edge of the document. The room seemed impossibly small, the walls closing in with every shallow breath I took. "I need this today, Leo." His voice dropped to a whisper so the employees passing by in the hallway couldn't hear. "Your performance has not met expectations. We both know this is for the best." 3 years of doubling the department's metrics flashed through my mind like a fast-forward movie. The sleepless nights, the cancelled weekends, the ideas he had stolen and presented as his own at executive meetings. And now, after I had questioned those suspicious transactions in last quarter's reports, this ambush. I picked up the pen, my vision narrowing to a tiny point. The resignation letter blurred before me, but one phrase remained crystal clear: voluntary resignation. I looked at Finley's triumphant expression, at the security guard waiting discreetly outside the door, and made my decision. What he didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this moment for weeks. I documented every irregular request, every questionable directive, every veiled threat. I studied labor law until dawn broke through the blinds of my apartment. I signed without protest, but when Finley stepped away to take a call, I made a subtle change to the standard text. His mistake, underestimating the power of a single word. My name is Leo Santos, and until 3 months ago, I was the lead financial analyst at Beckworth Industries. I am 32 years old, single, with a master's degree in business analysis and a certification in forensic accounting that I earned through night classes. Most people describe me as meticulous, some say obsessive about details. I organize my calendar by color, alphabetize my spice rack, and can spot a numerical discrepancy like most people notice lightning. My parents immigrated from Brazil before I was born, settling in a small town in the Midwest where my father opened an electronics repair shop. "Always check the smallest components first," he would say, hunched over circuit boards. "The smallest connection often causes the biggest failures." That became my philosophy in life. Pay attention to the details others overlook. When I joined Beckworth 4 years ago, the company was expanding rapidly, opening new offices across the country. The CEO, Aubrey Beckworth, had a reputation for innovation and inclusion. The company's slogan, "Building Better Futures Together," adorned every wall, email signature, and coffee mug. I believed it, perhaps naively. Finley Burke became my direct supervisor 2 years after I joined. He had been transferred from the West Coast office with glowing recommendations and an impressive resume. Tall, with prematurely silver hair and a voice that commanded attention, Finley moved around the office as if he owned the place. The executive team adored him. The board praised his innovative perspectives. The problems started subtly. First, my name disappeared from project proposal credits. Then I was excluded from meetings I had previously attended. My reports required multiple revisions for clarity, while male colleagues with similar findings received immediate approval. "You're being paranoid," my colleague Theo whispered when I mentioned the pattern. "Finley is demanding. He's like that with everyone." But he wasn't. I started keeping notes. Dates, times, witnesses, exact phrases. Even so, I stood out. Our department's efficiency increased 22% under my systematic approach. I created a predictive analytics tool that saved millions in acquisition costs. I remained visible, valuable, and vigilant. Then came the financial discrepancies. It started with an anomaly in the third quarter reports. Transfers between departmental budgets that didn't have the proper authorization codes. Small amounts that were easy to overlook, but they followed a pattern. I cross-referenced past quarters and found similar irregularities dating back to Finley's arrival. "These transactions need explanation," I said during our one-on-one meeting, sliding the highlighted printouts across his desk. "The approval chain is incomplete." Finley barely glanced at the papers. "Accounting approved this. You're overstepping, Leo." "But accounting requires director-level signatures for interdepartmental transfers. These don't have them." His expression changed then, something cold replacing his usual smug smile. "Let it go. This isn't your concern." I didn't let it go. If you're enjoying this story of how preparation can turn a moment of humiliation into justice, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. While Finley thought he had me completely cornered in that conference room, I kept my expression neutral. He didn't realize that I had spotted the first signs weeks ago. Small details that only someone with my background would notice. And now, as he looked at me with that overconfidence, I was mentally cataloging every mistake he was making. Instead of creating a secure folder on my personal drive, I continued investigating. With each new discovery, the pattern became clearer and more disturbing. Finley Burke wasn't just a manipulative supervisor. He was a sophisticated criminal operating under the protection of a respected executive position. I began to understand his strategy when I cross-referenced the financial transfer data with the dates of his private meetings. Every Wednesday, Finley had lunch at the same Italian restaurant in the city center. Always alone, always asking for the corner table, always paying in cash. Must be important to him, I remarked casually to Vincent, our marketing colleague who frequented the same place. What kind of people does he meet there? Meet. Vincent looked confused. Finley always eats alone. He stays there for 2 hours, working on his laptop and making phone calls. 2 hours. Enough time to coordinate complex bank transfers and receive confirmations from external partners. I discovered that Finley had built a network of shell companies, all registered with slight variations of the name Beckworth Industries. Beckworth Solutions, Beckworth Consulting, Beckworth Development. Each had a different address, but all led to post office boxes in cities where the company had never operated. The contracts were drawn up with surgical precision. The amounts were low enough to go unnoticed in the quarterly audit, but frequent enough to add up to significant sums. In 18 months, Finley had embezzled more than $800,000. You're obsessed with these numbers, Theo warned me during a coffee break. You're digging too deep. This could get you in trouble. Get us in trouble with whom? I asked, showing him a spreadsheet with the discrepancies highlighted. Look at this pattern. Every transfer happens on the Thursday after her strategic planning meetings. Always the same base amount, $9,800. Theo frowned. Why that specific amount? Because any transaction over $10,000 requires automatic approval from the board. He's keeping each transfer just below the oversight threshold. Finley's hostility escalated in proportion to my discoveries. First, he moved my workstation away from the main team, claiming I needed more focus. Then he began publicly questioning my ability to work under pressure. Leo seems to be struggling with basic deadlines, he announced during a departmental meeting. He may need additional training in time management. It was a lie. I had never missed a deadline. But Finley was carefully constructing a narrative to justify my future dismissal. The real revelation came when I found archived emails in a shared folder that he had forgotten to protect. Messages between Finley and someone identified only as BD discussed resource reallocation and capital flow optimization. One message in particular made my blood run cold. Leo is asking a lot of questions about the Q3 transfers. You need to eliminate this problem before he finds deeper connections. Do you have any suggestions on how to deal with employees who are too curious? The reply came the next day. Document everything. Build a history of poor performance. Then force a voluntary resignation to avoid a labor lawsuit. Problem employees need to be removed before they contaminate others. My poor performance. Me, who had increased departmental efficiency by 22%. That night, I called my father. I needed to hear his voice, to feel the solidity of his advice before making decisions I couldn't reverse. Dad, do you remember what you used to say about defective components? Of course, Leo. I always said that the smallest defective component can bring down the entire system. What if you discover that the defective component is also the best protected? The one everyone believes is essential. There was a pause. Then you document everything. You test every connection. And when you are absolutely sure, you replace the defective component with one that works properly. The next morning, I found my desk reorganized. Files I had left neatly arranged were jumbled. My computer had been updated overnight, with several programs reinstalled. Information security, Finley explained when I asked. We need to make sure all systems are protected against leaks. Leaks. He was warning me. During lunch, I walked to the Italian restaurant where Finley held his weekly meetings. I sat at a table with a view of his usual corner and watched. Right on time, he arrived. Not alone, as Vincent had thought. 3 minutes later, a man in a gray suit joined him. Brief conversation, exchange of documents, handshakes. I managed to photograph the man's license plate as he left. A quick search revealed that the vehicle was registered to Beckworth Development, one of the shell companies. Finley was meeting in person with his accomplices, coordinating the fraudulent transfers just 15 blocks from our office. That afternoon, he called me in for a private conversation. "Leo, I have some concerns about your recent performance." "Specific concerns?" "Your obsession with financial details that aren't your responsibility. Theo mentioned that you're asking questions about departmental transfers." Theo had reported me. Either Finley was lying to isolate me, or Theo was lying to protect me. Both possibilities were dangerous. "Just doing my job," I replied. "Your job is predictive analysis, not internal auditing. When you overstep your role, you create problems for the entire team." "Problems like uncovering financial irregularities?" His expression hardened. "Irregularities that exist only in your imagination. You're creating conspiracy theory where there is only normal administrative process." "Can I see the approval documentation for the September transfers?" "No. You can focus on your assigned work, or we can discuss whether this position is still right for you." A direct threat. Finley was showing his cards. "I understand perfectly." "I hope so. It would be a shame if your paranoia affected your annual review." I left his office knowing that my dismissal was being engineered. Every question I asked, every document I requested, every discrepancy I pointed out was used as evidence that I was a problem employee. But Finley made one crucial mistake. He underestimated my ability to document not only the financial irregularities, but also his own attempts to silence me. While he was building a fake dossier on my performance, I was building a real dossier on his criminal activities. While he thought he was isolating me, I was gathering evidence that connected him directly to a fraud scheme that could destroy not only his career but also result in years of prison time. The difference between us was simple. He was improvising a defense. I was conducting an investigation. And he still had no idea how deep I had penetrated his operation. In fact, he was about to discover that his meetings at the Italian restaurant were just the tip of an iceberg that included offshore accounts, international partners, and a network of corruption that extended far beyond Beckworth Industries. But first, he needed to eliminate me as an obstacle. And that's exactly what he tried to do 3 weeks later with that resignation letter and his ultimatum about never working in the industry again. What Finley didn't calculate was that by forcing me to sign that letter, he was giving me the perfect opportunity to turn my entire silent investigation into a legal bomb that would explode right in his hands. Finley's campaign to destroy me entered a new phase after our tense conversation about the documentation. If he had been subtle in his manipulations before, he was now relentless and direct. The following Monday, I arrived at the office to find my desk completely empty. Computer, files, even my personalized coffee mug, everything was gone. "Change in security protocol," Finley explained when I asked. "Due to your recent concerns about internal processes, we need to restrict your access to sensitive information." Sensitive information. I had 3 years of seniority and clearance for all of the company's financial systems. Now I was being treated like a suspicious intern. My new workstation was in the basement, next to the file dead zone. No windows, no colleagues nearby, just the constant hum of the ventilation system and stacks of dusty documents from decades past. "It's temporary," Vincent assured me over lunch. "He can't do this forever." But Vincent was wrong. Not only could Finley do it, he was systematically escalating his strategy. On Tuesday, I was removed from the departmental email list. On Wednesday, my password for the reporting system was temporarily suspended for maintenance. On Thursday, I found out that my presentation to the audit committee had been cancelled due to scheduling conflicts. Scheduling conflicts. The same presentation I had spent 3 weeks preparing, documenting exactly the irregularities Finley wanted to hide. "You're being paranoid," Theo repeated when I showed him the sequence of events. "These things happen. You're reading too much into it." Reading too much into it. As if 3 years of exemplary contributions could simply evaporate due to administrative coincidences. That's when I started noticing other employees avoiding eye contact. Conversations that stopped abruptly when I approached. Invitations to happy hours that never arrived. Finley was constructing a narrative where I was the problem, and the narrative was working. The most painful moment came during the monthly all-hands meeting. Finley was presenting the quarterly results that directly included two of my most important analyses. Thanks to Vincent's exceptional work in predictive analytics, he announced to the packed room, we were able to identify optimization opportunities that resulted in savings of $300,000. $300,000. My analysis. My work. My discovery. Vincent looked at me with apology in his eyes, but said nothing. No one said anything. I sat there in the back of the room, invisible, while Finley took the applause for my work. I felt my professional identity being erased in real time. That night, I called my mother. I needed to hear a voice that saw me as more than a problem employee. "Mijo," she said, using my childhood nickname, "you're hurting. I can hear it in your voice." "Mom, what if I'm really wrong? What if I'm being paranoid like everyone says?" "Leo Santos," her voice was firm, "you are the son of parents who rebuilt their entire lives in a strange country. Do you think we don't know when someone is trying to diminish us?" She was right. My parents had faced subtle discrimination for years, always questioning whether they were imagining hostility where none existed. But they had learned to trust their instincts. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know yet." "Then figure it out. But remember, you're not alone in this fight." The next morning, I found a message in my inbox. Sender, recursos.humanos@beckworth.com. Subject, mandatory meeting professional conduct. My heart raced. Finley was accelerating his strategy. The meeting was scheduled for 3 in the afternoon. 5 hours to prepare for what would likely be my professional execution. I used that time to do something I should have done weeks ago. I called every person who had worked with me on important projects over the past 3 years. The calls revealed a disturbing pattern. 6 different people mentioned being discreetly consulted about my recent performance. All reported that Finley had suggested concerns about my emotional stability and ability to work with others. Finley wasn't just isolating me. He was systematically destroying my professional reputation with carefully planted lies. 3 o'clock rolled around like a death sentence. I walked into the conference room with a binder containing all my documentation, not of financial irregularities, but of my own contributions to the company. Finley was there, accompanied by Diane Walsh from HR and a man I didn't recognize. "Leo, thanks for coming," Diane began. "We have some concerns about your recent professional conduct that we need to discuss." Professional conduct? "Several people have reported disruptive behavior," the unknown man interjected. "Inappropriate questioning of approved processes, paranoia about colleagues, resistance to constructive feedback." Paranoia. The word Finley had planted was being used against me in a formal meeting. "May I know who made these allegations?" "That's not appropriate," Diane replied. "Our concern is with your ability to maintain a collaborative work environment." Collaborative. As if questioning unauthorized financial transfers was equivalent to being a difficult colleague. "We want to offer support," Finley interjected in his most sympathetic voice. "Perhaps a few days of leave to consider whether this position is still aligned with your professional goals." Leave. The first step to forcing me to resign. "I don't need time off," I replied. "I need access to the systems that were removed without explanation." "That demonstrates exactly the kind of resistance we're discussing," the unknown man observed. "A collaborative attitude would be to accept the support offered." Resistance. Questioning the removal of my access was now resistance. I left that meeting knowing I had crossed an invisible line. Finley was no longer trying to manage or reform me. He was eliminating me. That night, I sat on the balcony of my apartment with a notebook and a pen. I wrote a single question at the top of the page: what can I do that he doesn't expect? The answer came gradually, word by word. Finley expected me to react emotionally. He expected me to make dramatic accusations without solid evidence. He expected me to isolate myself or resign voluntarily. He didn't expect me to start recording our conversations. He didn't expect me to keep copies of all the documents he thought he had removed. He didn't expect me to start asking specific people direct questions about his activities. More importantly, He didn't expect me to stop trying to prove my innocence and start proving his guilt. It was at that moment that I decided Finley Burke would pay for everything he was doing. Not through direct confrontation or dramatic accusations, but through the same meticulous methodology he had used against me. He had taught me exactly how to destroy someone's career. Now I would use those lessons against the teacher himself. What Finley didn't know was that by forcing me into the basement, he had given me access to decades of old files. Files that contained information about every suspicious financial transfer he thought he had hidden. And I had plenty of free time to examine every document, every pattern, every connection. While he celebrated my apparent defeat, I was putting together a puzzle that would reveal not only his criminal activities, but also a network of complicity that extended far beyond Beckworth Industries. The real war was just beginning. And this time, I wouldn't be the victim. Over the next 2 weeks, I turned my forced relocation to the basement into a strategic advantage. While Finley believed he had neutralized me, I was systematically building the most devastating case in the history of Beckworth Industries. The dead file became my base of operations. Decades of financial documents, old contracts, audit records, it was all there, waiting for someone with enough knowledge to connect the dots. I discovered that Finley's scheme was far more sophisticated than I had imagined. Shell companies weren't his only strategy. He had created a network of fictitious consultants, each billing exactly $9,700 a month, always below the automatic oversight threshold. The names were brilliant in their simplicity: David Berkeley, Financial Consulting; Finn Burkowski, Strategic Solutions; Burke Financial Associates. Subtle variations on his own name, registered in different states with addresses that led to virtual offices. In 3 years, Finley had stolen more than $1.2 million from the company. But theft was only part of the story. While investigating the consulting contracts, I discovered something even more sinister: blackmail. Finley had used his position to collect compromising information on senior executives. A vice president with an online gambling addiction. A director falsifying expense reports. A manager altering performance data to protect favorite subordinates. Each discovery was documented in an encrypted digital folder that I found on a forgotten server backup. Finley wasn't just stealing money, he was controlling people through their secrets. Blackmail explained his meteoric rise. It explained why no one questioned his decisions. It explained why I had been isolated so quickly when I started asking questions. That night, I called my father again. "Dad, do you remember when you fixed the Martin's TV? The one that had intermittent problems?" "Sure. It took me weeks to find the problem. It was a faulty capacitor that was causing the whole board to fail." "And when you found the capacitor, what did you do?" "First, I tested the entire circuit to understand the full impact. Then I replaced not just the faulty capacitor, but every component that had been damaged by it. There's no point in fixing just the obvious problem if the entire system has been compromised. Replace the entire compromised system." That was exactly what I needed to do. The next morning, I began making discreet phone calls. First, to Eleanor Pham, the labor lawyer I had researched weeks earlier. Then to a forensic accountant I had met at a certification course. Finally, to a private investigator specializing in corporate fraud. Each conversation followed the same pattern. I had evidence of significant financial irregularities and needed to understand my legal options. "With that amount of documentation," Eleanor told me during our meeting at a discreet cafe, "you have several options. Reporting to the SEC, a wrongful termination lawsuit, or collaborating with a criminal investigation. Which of those would have the most impact? It depends on what you want to achieve. Personal compensation? A labor lawsuit? Systemic change? A regulatory complaint? Prison for the guilty party? Criminal collaboration?" "I want it all." She smiled. "Then we do it all. But we need to be strategic about the sequence." While I built my legal case, Finley escalated his campaign to completely isolate me. He reassigned my remaining projects, canceled my participation in departmental meetings, and began circulating rumors about my emotional instability. "Leo's been under a lot of stress," I heard him comment to Vincent in the break room. "Unfounded concerns about routine processes. I think he needs professional help." Professional help. Finley was planting seeds to question my mental competence. His strategy was brilliant. If I eventually exposed his activities, he could attribute my allegations to paranoia or mental breakdown. Who would believe an unstable employee making dramatic accusations against a respected executive? But Finley made one crucial mistake. He underestimated my ability to document not only his criminal activities, but also his smear campaign against me. I installed a recording app on my cell phone. Every conversation, every disparaging comment, every attempt to discredit me was captured and archived. When Finley mentioned to Diane in HR that I was asking inappropriate questions about finances, the conversation was recorded. When he suggested to Aubrey Beckworth that I might be projecting my own insecurities onto the company's processes, the call was recorded. When he told the new intern that I was an example of how stress can affect professional judgment, every word was documented. The private investigator, a man named Marcus Chun, reviewed my documentation with professional admiration. In 20 years doing this, he said, I've never seen a case so meticulously constructed by someone from the inside. You have financial evidence, blackmail records, documentation of retaliation, and recordings of defamation. It's a grand slam. How long do you need to verify everything? 2 weeks for independent confirmation. Another week to coordinate with the appropriate authorities. 3 weeks. 3 weeks to finalize the complete destruction of Finley Burke. During that time, Finley continued his performance as a confident executive. He presented to the board a proposal for financial restructuring that would permanently eliminate my position. He participated in industry conferences as an expert in team management. He was even interviewed by a trade magazine about innovative leadership. If you believe that people like Finley eventually pay for their crimes, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Because what happened over the next 3 weeks proved that justice, though sometimes slow, can be absolutely devastating. The irony was delicious. While Finley publicly celebrated his victory over me, I was systematically building a network of evidence that would not only destroy him, but reveal the full extent of his corruption. Every article he published, every interview he gave, every public appearance became further proof of his arrogance and lack of awareness of what was about to happen. On the eve of my case's completion, I received a call from Marcus Chun. Leo, you need to know something. While investigating Finley's shell companies, we've uncovered connections to a larger network of corporate fraud. He's not operating alone. Other Beckworth executives. No. Other companies. Other victims. Finley is part of a scheme that spans at least 6 corporations in the region. The revelation hit me like a punch in the stomach. I wasn't just building a case against a corrupt supervisor. I was uncovering a criminal network that had been operating for years. How many people have been affected? Preliminary figures? Hundreds of employees, millions in financial damages, dozens of careers destroyed. Finley wasn't just a criminal. He was a serial predator who had turned the corporate environment into his personal hunting ground. That night, I sat on the balcony of my apartment with a clean notebook. I wrote a single question at the top of the page: how many other people like me are there? The answer gave me final clarity about what needed to be done. This was no longer about personal revenge or restoring my reputation. It was about stopping Finley from continuing to destroy innocent lives. It was about turning my humiliation into a protective shield for future victims. It was about using my pain to build a system where predators like Finley could no longer operate with impunity. The next morning, I called Eleanor Pham with a final decision. Let's go all in. Criminal charges, a labor lawsuit, cooperation with a federal investigation. I want Finley to face every possible consequence. Are you sure? This is going to be a long fight. He'll fight back. Let him try. He's spent months underestimating me. Now he'll find out the price of waking up someone who has nothing left to lose. And that was the moment my transformation from victim to hunter was complete. Finley had created his own nightmare. And I was about to make it a reality. The following Monday, at 7 in the morning, 3 black cars pulled up in front of the Beckworth Industries building. Federal agents with FBI badges calmly entered the main lobby and headed straight for the 14th floor. I watched everything from the cafeteria on the ground floor, drinking my morning coffee as I had done for the past 4 years. The difference was that this time, I knew exactly why they were there. Eleanor had coordinated everything perfectly. While the agents executed search and seizure warrants, she simultaneously filed my formal complaint with the Securities and Exchange Commission and the constructive dismissal lawsuit. The timing was no coincidence. Finley would arrive at the office at 8:15, as usual. That would give the agents enough time to examine his files before he could destroy any evidence. At 8:17, I saw Finley step out of the elevator. His confident stride slowed when he noticed unusual movement in the hallway. He stopped completely when he saw an agent leaving his office carrying a box of documents. From the ground floor, I could see his expression through the glass windows. First confusion, then growing panic. My phone vibrated. A message from Marcus Chun, the investigator. He's trying to call someone. His phone has been confiscated by the agents. Time to go up. I took the elevator to the 14th floor. The hallway was full of whispering employees, some clearly frightened. Diane from HR was talking nervously with an older agent. I found Finley in the conference room, sitting in front of 2 federal agents. When he saw me come in, his eyes widened. "Leo? What are you doing here?" "Assisting with the investigation," I replied, sitting down at the table. "About the fraud scheme you've been running for 3 years. "Fraud scheme." He tried to laugh, but the sound came out strangled. "You've completely lost your mind. These are your paranoid fantasies." The lead agent, identified as Peterson, opened a folder. "Mr. Burke, we have documentation of unauthorized transfers totaling $1,200,000. We have records of shell companies created in your name. We have recordings of your meetings with outside accomplices." Finley paled. "Recordings." "Every Wednesday, Bella Vista Restaurant, table 16, I continued. "You met with representatives of the shell companies to coordinate fraudulent billing. I thought no one was paying attention. You followed me?" "I documented it. There's a difference." Peterson continued, "We also have evidence of blackmail against senior executives, retaliation against employees who questioned your activities, and participation in a fraud ring involving multiple corporations." "Multiple corporations?" Finley repeated, his voice breaking. "Your operation here at Beckworth was just one of 6 infiltrated companies," I explained. "Each following the same pattern, creating shell companies, rigging contracts, blackmailing supervisors, eliminating employees who asked questions." The moment of complete understanding washed over his face like a wave. First surprise, then confusion, followed by disbelief, and finally that rare moment of absolute clarity when he realized not only that he had lost, but exactly how and why. "You can't prove a connection between the companies," he muttered, "but without conviction." "I can," I replied. "Because you used the same accountant for all of them. The same lawyer to register the companies. The same pattern of monthly transfers. You've become predictable, Finley." Peterson closed the folder. "Finley Burke, you're under arrest for corporate fraud, money laundering, blackmail, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes." As they read his rights, Finley looked at me with an expression I will never forget. It wasn't anger or hatred. It was pure recognition, the realization that he had completely underestimated someone he considered finished. "You planned all this," he said when they were done. "No," I corrected him. "You planned all this. I just documented it." 3 hours later, Aubrey Beckworth called me personally. "Leo, I'd like to talk to you about your reinstatement and a leadership opportunity in the new compliance division we're creating." "We'll talk," I replied. "But first, I need you to understand something. Finley didn't operate alone within Beckworth. Others knew about and benefited from the scheme. Other employees. Other executives. I have names, dates, and amounts. The cleanup needs to be thorough." There was a long pause. "I see. Can you turn that information over to our internal audit department?" "I've already given it to the federal agents. You'll receive an official copy shortly." As I watched the news that night, I saw Finley being led away in handcuffs from the courthouse after his bail hearing. Bail denied due to flight risk. I felt no vindictive satisfaction. I felt only the quiet understanding that some stories must end so that others can begin. Next to the television lay my new offer letter from Beckworth Industries. Director of Corporate Integrity. Salary 40% higher than my previous position. Authority to implement new financial transparency protocols. I picked up a pen and signed my name, this time voluntarily. What Finley never understood was that by trying to destroy me, he had given me the motivation and access I needed to destroy something much bigger, the entire network of corruption he had meticulously built over the years. His downfall wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of the transformation he had inadvertently set in motion. And while he faced decades in prison, I was preparing to ensure that no other Finley Burke could ever operate in the corporate environment I was now charged with protecting. True revenge wasn't in seeing him fall. It was in becoming the permanent obstacle against people like him. 6 months later, I was sitting in the same conference room where Finley had tried to force me to sign that resignation letter. This time, I was on the other side of the table, chairing a meeting with the new compliance team I had built. "We detected 3 suspicious transfers at the Chicago branch," reported Amanda, my new senior analyst. "Same methodology we identified in the Burke case. Amounts below the supervision threshold, companies with names similar to the parent company." "Document everything," I replied. "And contact the FBI immediately. We will not repeat the mistakes of the past." The system we created after Finley's downfall had become a model for other corporations. Mandatory transparency, anonymous reporting channels, independent quarterly audits. Impossible for another predator to operate with impunity. The week before, I had received a call from Detective Morrison of the FBI. "Leo, Finley's trial began yesterday. He pleaded guilty to all charges." What was the sentence? 15 years in federal prison, restitution of $2.2 million, and a lifetime ban from executive office. He also turned over information about the larger network in exchange for a reduced sentence. 15 years. He'd be 62 when he got out, if he got out. His reputation destroyed, his contacts lost, his arrogance shattered. "There's something else," Morrison continued. "He asked me to send you a letter. Do you want it?" "No," I replied without hesitation. "This story is over." But the truth was that my story was just beginning. As Director of Corporate Integrity, I had implemented changes that extended far beyond Beckworth Industries. Theo, now my right-hand man, had developed software that automatically detected patterns of fraud. Veronique led the corporate ethics training program. Even Vincent, who had initially benefited from stealing my ideas, was now working to repair the damage he had caused. The impact was beyond anything we could have imagined. 16 companies in the region adopted our compliance model. 342 people affected by Finley's scheme received full compensation. 7 complicit executives were fired and sued. At the annual company-wide meeting, Aubrey Beckworth invited me to the main stage. "What happened to us last year was painful," she told the 1,000 employees gathered. "But it was also transformative. Leo Santos showed us that integrity isn't just a value on paper, but an active responsibility we all share." The applause was genuine, but the most meaningful moment came afterward, when a young analyst approached me. "Mr. Santos, my name is Jessica. I wanted to thank you for the anonymous reporting system. My supervisor was forcing me to do sexual favors in exchange for positive reviews. Thanks to your program, he was fired last week." Cases like Jessica's came in monthly. Sexual harassment, racial discrimination, petty fraud, favoritism. Every allegation investigated thoroughly, every wrongdoer held accountable. Finley had tried to destroy me to protect a criminal scheme. He had inadvertently created a permanent defender against people just like him. 3 months ago, I was invited to speak at a national conference on corporate ethics. My presentation, Turning Retaliation into Reform, was seen by more than 50,000 executives. "Personal revenge is temporary," I told the packed auditorium. "But systemic change is eternal. When someone tries to silence you, your response should not be to shout louder, but to build systems where voices like yours can never be silenced again." During the question and answer session, a CEO asked, "How did you find the courage to take on someone so powerful?" "It wasn't courage," I replied. "It was documentation. Courage is emotional and temporary. Evidence is factual and permanent. Finley had power, but I had truth. And truth, when properly documented, always wins." Finley's story became a case study in business schools. Not as an example of criminal success, but as a demonstration that corporate predators operate with predictable patterns that can be detected and defeated. Meanwhile, I continued to receive messages from employees at other companies who had identified wrongdoing using methods similar to mine. Each successful case multiplied the impact of Finley's downfall. On the last day of the year, I found a letter on my desk. Not from Finley, but from my father. "Mijo," he wrote, "you turned the smallest flaw into the entire system. That defective component was not only removed, but it served to strengthen the entire circuit. I am proud of you for learning not only how to fix, but how to prevent." As I read, I looked out the window of my office on the 14th floor. The same floor where Finley had tried to humiliate me. The same hallway where I thought my career was over. Now, that space housed the most advanced compliance division in the country. Young analysts worked at well-lit stations, protected by policies I had written. Their voices mattered, their concerns were heard, their careers were protected. The most profound transformation wasn't in the company, but in myself. I had learned that justice isn't something that happens to you, but something you actively build. That power doesn't come from position, but from purpose. That the best revenge against those who try to destroy you is to become indestructible. If this story of how documentation and perseverance can transform humiliation into systemic reform has inspired you, subscribe to the channel for more stories of people who refuse to be silenced. Because sometimes, the most important signature isn't on a resignation letter, but on the decision to fight for a world where letters like this are no longer necessary. Today, 5 years later, Finley Burke is prisoner number 82654 at the federal penitentiary in Terre Haute. I'm Leo Santos, architect of a system that protects thousands of workers every day. He tried to erase my professional existence with a pen. I used that same pen to rewrite the entire rules of the game. In the end, the real victory wasn't seeing him fall. It was building a world where people like him can no longer rise.